Greetings all, welcome to another episode of Pen and Paint, the channel where I merge my love of miniature painting with my growing passion for writing. In this episode, we'll be painting the Sorceress Skaven Seer for Games Workshop's Non-Feast Claw Pack. Our focus will be on the two-tone linen and blue cloak, as well as the wonderfully simple rich wood. In contrast to previous models, we've already painted much of the Seer off camera so that you can see how today's last few steps bring it all together. We'll be using exclusively Army Painter paints in this video to ensure accessibility should you wish to replicate what you see here. The full list of paints used are on screen now. Paints will also be noted as they're used. Video timestamps are available for each step of the painting process. If you'd like to read today's story or listen to it without the video, links to pure text and audio versions are in the video description below. Feel free to mute the video if you're only here for the painting. Today's story is Sneaky Clever, Chapter 2 of A Red Harvest, Part 2, War Battle for Broken Lands. For those of you unfamiliar with the story thus far, a brief description of previous events can be found in the video description. As the unearthly green light faded from the tip of his outstretched claw, Titchfinger could smell the fear about him waver. The twitching of tails and subtle, grating squeaks of despair and fright that signaled an imminent collapse and retreat stiffened. Frantic, dancing eyes hardened, and the faltering rabble of craven rats about him surged forward with broken blades and shattered shields raised high. The tide of battle shifted. The menacing orange balls of teeth and fury which the troublesome goblins had managed to, if not quite tame, at least harness to astonishing effect, were torn out of the sky. Flashes of green skin and tattered pale robes were overwhelmed by a wave of matted fur and soiled blue and green rags. Within a few minutes, the hollow of shattered stone and rotting leaves blown down from the world above was quiet, save for the gurgling moans of those who had yet to accept they were already dead. The entrenched goblins were overrun, and the wave of rats washed out and down the valleys and channels to smash again against distant barricades and holdouts. Just like before, the awesome presence of Titchfinger and his baleful verminous light were alone enough to change the tide of battle. In a different war, against a different enemy, this would have gratified the proud, grey rat to no end, proof of his power and manifest right to his claim of High Seer. But not this war. Not this enemy. Here, success only ever seemed to bring Bubic Titchfinger, High Seer of the Court of Lord Chagits, a mild sense of dread. The whole affair smelled sour, and not only because of the rotting masses of slaves that choked the thoroughways beneath the broken lands. Titchfinger picked his way delicately through the corpses, scanning the carnage, whiskers twitching. He rolled over a ratkin with his staff to reveal a particularly mangled goblin. Or was it two? He added up the limbs and marked a pair of scratches on his mental tally. He gazed out over the rest of the battlefield.
Not enough,
he clicked with mild frustration. He'd complete his count, but the numbers were already too skewed.
What say, master?
The mewling squeak came from somewhere behind the High Seer. He ignored it. Another battle won, another triumph against the vile little greenskins. And another itching in his gut that all was not what it seemed to be. The Seer stooped over a hopper stuck full of spears. He poked at it with his rune-inscribed blade, watching as the corrupting influence took hold of the orange flesh. Tendrils of inky black-purple spread out from the bloodless wounds, twisting around the rotund beast, fattening and flattening it until the whole of the creature was a giant bruise. So potent was the blade's power that even death was no ward against its effect. Titchfinger eyed the mass as the skin bubbled, popping and sizzling as it melted into a nauseating, unidentifiable puddle of stinking muck. As well informed as he was, Titchfinger hadn't foreseen this bit of trickery from the goblins. For all his spies and schemes, the seer had been as surprised as the lowest ratkin when the first ball of bouncing orange teeth had come hurtling down the gully. He'd dived into the nearest escape hole with fright just like any other scabby, mindless slave rat when the creature had smashed into, then high over, the front ranks of warriors. That the act of cowardice almost certainly saved his life wasn't at issue. Fear in the face of overwhelming odds was an accepted, even admirable quality in the ratkin, as it tended to greatly improve personal survival. No, what riled Titchfinger was that he had been so completely and utterly overwhelmed by the beast's appearance, a fact the Rat King had pointedly remarked on during his council of war shortly after.
Dumb, stupid Nitbit.
He muttered darkly to himself as he continued stepping over the twisted bodies of his fellow rats and disturbingly infrequent goblins.
You make me look like fool. You wait, ugly goblin. I make you look dead. Master Bubic! What?
The seer whirled on the acolyte, who, wisely, had maintained his distance. The young ratkin shuffled nervously in his tattered robes, refusing to meet the testy warlock's eye.
The battle master!
He stuttered.
What you want say? Victory win, yes?
Victory win. Yes. The forces of the Rat King were indeed victorious. That was undeniable. At the height of tension, when it seemed like his kin would break and flee, the High Seer had strode into the fray, and, calling on the sorcerous powers of the Verminous, had smote and shriveled the enemies of ratkind. Almost at once the goblins had fallen before his might, or been destroyed by the feated swarm, the battle turning from imminent failure to crushing success, as had happened the last time Titchfinger had taken to the field, and the time before that.
Victory.
He said softly, looking around absently at the devastation.
Yes, victory.
He turned to the trembling robed rat.
Go tell Chagits. We win, succeed here. Yes, yes, victory!
With a horrid, broken-toothed grin, the young rat nodded and scampered away, climbing over the dead before disappearing down a tunnel. Fallen, or fled. Alone now and away from yellow-rimmed eyes, Titchfinger gave himself over to his troubles. There were too few goblin bodies littering the field about him, as was the case in previous battles. The one and only time he had raised this observation with Lord Chagits, the Rat King had dismissed him. Ratkin always suffered higher casualties than goblins, after all. They were far more numerous, and so far more disposable. Sound, indisputable logic. And so what if there weren't as many goblins? Was that not what he, High Seer Bubic Titchfinger, had been tasked with in the weeks and months leading up to war? The poisoning of fungal brews? The sabotaging of hopper pens? Did Titchfinger not declare, when Chagits had demanded an update on the Seer's progress, that his spies had made excellent work in disrupting the goblins' preparations and debilitating their warriors? He had. What he hadn't mentioned, however, was how eerily effective they had been, to the point that Titchfinger was dubious of the reports. Case in point, the Hopper Cavalry. The Ratkin were winning battles, that was true, but, and this was the far more salient question, were they winning the war? While the aged High Seer had perfect confidence there was no rat cleverer than himself, Titchfinger felt the twist of uncertainty digging away, a gnawing that grew worse with each victory he saw, each collapse his enemy suffered. He felt only a wheedling sense of doom now when he should be exulting. Despite the string of triumphs offset by only occasional defeats, Titchfinger had the uncomfortable feeling he was, somehow, in some way he could not yet fathom, being outplayed by the irksome greenskin in shimmering armor. In the clamming gloom of midnight, surrounded by corpses and the unsteady flicker of a dozen smoking torches stuck haphazardly in the ground and bodies around him, Bubic Titchfinger worried and fretted. He did not like not knowing. The tall, gray-furred rat bent over and picked up a shiny bit of yellowed metal protruding from the turned-up chasm floor. It was an effigy of the goblin's celestial god, a crude sickle moon with an empty hole for a thong of string or leather. The fleck of polished red stone it had for an eye flickered in the dim torchlight. Titchfinger brought it closer to one of the flames, his eyes narrowed in study. It was a chip of garnet. Or was it ruby? A gem nicked, most likely, from an ornate pommel or trinket from the surface, smashed to fragments and beaten into these blasphemous icons to be handed out to favorite captains and the like. The Ratkin did much the same, but with slivers of weirdstone and small bones. The High Seer started a quiet chant that would pulse a modicum of magic into his hand to pulverize the grinning affront, but stopped midway. A whisker on his muzzle twitched. Titchfinger pulled out a small, unadorned blade and carefully brought the razor-sharp edge to the effigy's eye. He gently pressed the tip into the smooth surface. It cracked. Titchfinger's yellow eyes widened as the fine fur of his ears stood up sharply. This wasn't a garnet or a ruby. It wasn't a gemstone at all. Titchfinger hurried over to where he found the effigy. He turned over dismembered rats looking for more tokens. He searched every nearby goblin corpse with meticulous care, then a number of others scattered about. He found nothing. In his panic, he considered calling for acolytes to help him search, but caught himself. Titchfinger dropped the goblin he was holding. He stood up straight and did what he could to calm his hammering heart. He walked shakily towards a torch, withdrawing the grinning effigy he had pocketed to study once more. He turned it about, watching the light catching glint. The rat's breathing slowed. It was glass. Red glass, of an unmistakable hue. There was only one source of such glass Titchfinger knew of, and it wasn't from the Broken Lands.
Sneaky, clever Nitbit,
he muttered in grudging admiration.
You make us all look like fools.
Already the seer's mind was coursing through the logical consequences of the discovery. There were implications to that small chip of glass that boggled Titchfinger, who doubted even his nemesis understood what the full course of events would be. It was an endpoint, a destination whose route led through ruin for rat and goblin alike.
2 little fuel green bodies.
And now he knew why. Lord Chagits was moving too fast. Fast and blind. Intent on capitalizing on the Ratkin's growing momentum, he had shifted the bulk of his forces towards the heart of the goblin lines, intent on crushing them in a massive 2-pronged blow. Titchfinger knew now that this would fail. Horrendously. And that meant an opportunity.
Cree-craw!
Titchfinger shouted to the empty space about him.
Stop skulking and come get here!
From a dark crook in the rocks above and behind Titchfinger, shadows coalesced into dark robes. They moved silently down the rough cavern walls, stirring neither stone nor air, whispering to within a few steps from Titchfinger.
Yes, Seer?
Its voice was a sibilant blade through unprotected flesh.
Gather runners. 3 and 4. Bring back best, leave worst. Have them tell all acolytes, return to Tanos. Be sneaky secret. Let none know. And the Stitcher.
Creecraw's mind was as sharp as his knives. Titchfinger considered the question. The Stitcher would be tricky. Chagits would raise an eye at the disappearance of the High Seer's minion, but he'd expect Titchfinger to try and pull something on the eve of victory anyways. Paranoia, like fear, was an excellent survival tool. Runners were generally invisible, and so long as there were a few lurking about to be called on, the Rat King would be none the wiser. On the other hand, if his prized fleshcrafter were to suddenly disappear...
Leave him for now.
Titchfinger said at last.
Still carry him away later. You'll know when.
Titchfinger faced the Master Knife Runner.
Do this yourself. If you can't, kill him. Make it look like goblins, yes? Understand? Understand.
The grey rat nodded, turning away.
Yes, go then.
A moment later, he was alone. Fully, this time. Creecraw ultimately answered to the Rat King and the Rat King alone. A check on the High Seer's power and control of the runners at large. There was a good chance that the business with the Stitcher would prompt Creecraw to snitch on Titchfinger, but the rat was betting that if he could sense something was wrong with the whole war, then Creecraw certainly did. It would explain why the Master Runner had been shadowing the Seer the past few days. If he was under orders from Chagits to keep an eye on the Seer, he would never have let his presence be known until the Seer was stuck full of blades. And even then, Creecraw might still choose to remain unseen. But Rat Kings had a nasty habit of dying suddenly and violently. It was the reason Titchfinger himself had little interest in the position. Better to back a promising rat when the job opened, someone sympathetic and that could be controlled, at least until power went to the rat's head. Titchfinger was fairly sure Chagits' reign would soon come to an abrupt end. The gamble was whether the Master Runner sensed the same. Calling on the verminous powers, the High Seer filled the goblin fetish with ichor green light, corroding the tarnished yellow metal to black ash and boiling the incriminating glass to vapor. Should Chagits somehow survive the coming apocalypse of steel and aether, it would not do for the Seer to be found with the trinket on him. Bubic Titchfinger brushed the charred remains from his hands and blinkered about, surprised to find that the torches had died down, with several having gone out completely. He sniffed the air, eyes roaming the ridgeline high above him. Dawn was still some time away, and it would be several hours before daylight would crawl down the walls and both sides were forced underground. There the fighting would stop until evening returned. The tunnels remaining under goblin control were too hardened for the ratkin to break, too narrow for either overwhelming numbers or the Stitcher's abominations to press or punch through. Another day, perhaps a second, and Chagits would announce the final assault. As his gaze searched the skies he could not see, the grey rat felt the gnawing in his gut return. This time, in anticipation.
You will succeed today, ugly goblin.
Titchfinger chittered to himself as he scampered out of the ring of carnage and into a jagged opening of blackness.
But tomorrow, yes, tomorrow the great Bubic Titchfinger will crush you forever good.
That was Sneaky Clever, the latest installment in the ongoing narrative, A Red Harvest, inspired by the Grey Seer model by Games Workshop. I hope you enjoyed the tale. Painting this model was a pleasant change of pace from previous models in this series, as I not only had to paint only one vicious ratman, but I also allowed myself ample time to complete it. With all the other projects on the go and the general nonsense that life throws my way, it can be hard to crunch through entire units in time for a video. Having a solid week to work on one beautiful sculpt in the hours between work and life was lovely. As you can see, I'm still making my way through the second unit of Clan Rats. I promise you these will get done before the end of this particular story arc, they just might take a few more weeks with everything else on the go. Or months. Man, I hope it's not months. As ever, if you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. If you have any suggestions, questions, or feedback on anything you've seen in this episode, please comment below. And if you know anyone who might be interested in some model-inspired storytelling, why not send them this way? That's it for today. See you next time.